Okay, so first off, I have to start off with a little way too in-depth context. Because otherwise, who would I even be? So, the Pueblo Indians were actually many groups of Indians. They were called Pueblo Indians because of their permanent villages, or pueblo. They were majorly peaceful, with mainly farmer populations, since hunting animals in the dry hot region wasn't the most effective idea. They farmed, practiced religious ceremonies, and lived with a kinship system that dictated who got to live in which pueblo. Also, pueblos were mainly independent, only rarely connecting with one another for trade or sometimes marriage. All in all, they were super rad. And the Spanish had to come in and try to fuck it up. The main event that kicked this all off was the Acoma Massacre. Nice name, right? Probably means like, one forgot the fucking hot sauce, so we politely kicked him out of the village. Fuck you, one, right? Sadly, no. See, the Acoma were a part of the Pueblo Indians. And when the Spanish conquistadors started popping up in New Mexico and Texas and all that area, they had a relatively peaceful relationship. The Spanish ignored the Acoma, and the Acoma ignored the Spanish. Nice, lovely, no reason to mess with that. At least until this Dick Don 08 said fuck that, and got permission from Spain to go ahead and conquer the Acoma. Also, I say Don, and will not be using it in his name, because in Spanish Don is a prefix that's meant to denote respect. Kind of like sir in English, which would allude to there being something worth respecting about this piece of rotting garbage, and there really isn't. So he's just dickhead, or 08 not done anything, motherfucker. So 08 gets permission to conquer the Acoma, and the Acoma hear about this, and don't like it. Nobody wants to be conquered, man, especially not by fucking Catholics. So they start rearing, to go on the defensive, and say fuck you to 08, but then they also remember that, because of the Spanish's more sophisticated technology and weaponry, they see them as on par with gods, and you don't fuck with gods. So instead they opted to politely negotiate. A polite, fuck you, go away if you will. 08 agrees to this, and he sends his fuckwit of an FU Captain Wanders Aldiva up to lead the negotiations. Aldiva took 17 men up with him, and when they got to the Pueblo they started demanding food. The Acoma refused them, and allegedly, I say allegedly just to be factual, but let's be real, they definitely did this, attacked some Acoma women in retribution. The Acoma didn't like this, so they responded by attacking Alvida and his men, killing Alvida and 11 of his men. When 08 heard about this he was pissed, so he sent his other fuckwit nephew Vicente Alvida to go and attack the Acoma. Alvida 2.0 took 70 men with him, and they arrived in Acoma Pueblo on January 21st, in 1599. The battle started the next morning, on the 22nd, and it led to 2 days of skirmishes in which the Acoma held their own, and the Spanish tried to bust through. Eventually, though, Alvida 2.0 remembered he had a cannon, so he used it to breach the Pueblo. Some upsetting statistics: there were an estimated 6,000 people living in Acoma Pueblo, 2,000 of which were warriors. 500 of those warriors were killed in the battle, and 300 women and children. Then another 500 were taken as prisoners and punished. The punishments decided by that cunt 08 were that every man over 25 was to have his right foot cut off and be enslaved for 20 years. Only 24 men were actually amputated, but still. Then men 12-25, and all women over the age of 12 were also sentenced to 20 years of slavery. Only 60 of the youngest women were deemed not guilty, but they were handed out to Catholic governance for conversion. Though, when King Philip heard about all this, he banished 08 from Nuevo Mexico. Though I couldn't find anything about him, I don't know, freeing those enslaved or the little girls sent to covenants for conversion. Anyways, on the bright side, quite a few Acoma escaped and rebuilt their pueblo, which still stands today, so fuck you 08. This was unfortunately just the start of a lot of bad shit the Pueblans were going to have to go through. It especially kicked off when Spain established their first permanent colonial settlement in 1598. This led to the establishment of encomiendas, which let the colonizers demand tributes from the Pueblans. These could be in the form of corn, labor, and textiles. Then there was the Catholic missionaries that kept trying to convert the Pueblans to Catholicism. And for a while they didn't care what the people did in their free time, as long as they at least pretended to be Catholic, getting baptized, Catholic weddings, attending Mass, etc. But this Douche Alonso de Posada decided he didn't like that. So he banned sacred kachina dances, and had missionaries seize and burn sacred masks, prayer sticks, and effigies. They also destroyed ceremonial pits called kivas that acted as ritual sites and hangout spots for men. He also forbade the usage of entheogenic drugs, basically psychedelics, but specifically psychedelics used for the purpose of spiritual or sacred experiences. Any Spanish who tried to oppose this or support the Pueblans, like Nicolas de Reguila, were charged with heresy and tried by the Inquisition. One of the final straws was when a drought hit in the 1670s, causing famine among the Pueblans. Cause remember, they don't really hunt, just rely on their farming. And also an increase in Apache attacks that the Spanish were doing nothing to stop. This led to the Spanish arresting a bunch of Pueblo medicine men and charging them with usage of sorcery. They hung a couple of them, and others they publicly whipped. When Pueblo leaders caught wind of this, they were not pleased, and immediately marched on Santa Fe, where most of the prisoners were being held in force. Many of the Spanish were away fighting the Apache, so they had no choice but to give up their prisoners. Among one of the freed was a man named Pope. He decided he'd had enough of all this bullshit and started to plan a real rebellion, one that would work and fight over the Spanish once and for all. His plan was this: 1. Win over local Pueblo leaders. 2. Get them all to rise up at the same time and kill all Spanish in their area. And 3. Then have everyone meet up in Santa Fe to finish off the Spanish. He also told them the Pueblo gods would grant them prosperity and end the drought if they got rid of the stain that was the Spaniards. Once he'd gotten enough people to support him, he sent out runners with cords that had knots in them and instructions that the Pueblo leaders were to untie a knot every morning. And when the last knot was untied, they were to attack the Spanish. The date was to be August 11, 1680. Unfortunately, some of the more Spanish-friendly Pueblans let the Spanish in on the plan, and they were able to capture 2 of the young Pueblans tasked with running the cords to the leaders. This was on August 9th, and the 2 kids were tortured until they told the Spaniards what the cords meant. Pope heard about this and ordered that the revolt take place a day earlier, August 10th instead. The Hopi Pueblo didn't get this message, though, and they attacked on time. Luckily, though, it didn't matter much, because everything went according to plan. The Pueblos rose up, killing East Spanish near them, before heading to Santa Fe, where the governor of New Mexico, Antonio de Rotamin, surrendered, leading the rest of the Spanish out of New Mexico and Pueblo territory, and leaving the Pueblo to their own customs and land. Well, at least for 12 years, because then they were unfortunately reconquered.